Hey, Whippersnappers, welcome to the TGSN retrospective look back at the historic first season of the Little League. I'm your host, Tortimer the Grey, and today I'm joined by Kreia of the Mossdeep Magikarps. Welcome, Kreia.
Thank you so much for having me, Tortimer.
Absolutely, Kreia. This season we have a rotating door of co-hosts stopping in, and those co-hosts are going to be coming from each of the teams in the Little League. And I'm so excited to have you here representing the Mossdeep Magikarps. You had a great week last week, didn't you?
Yes, I certainly seemed to do fairly well in last week's battles.
That you did. Now, this week, let's take a look at what we have coming up.
The 4 battles we have to look forward to in week 2 are the Deerfield Deerlings versus the Geosenge Carbinks, the Mossdeep Magikarps versus the Detroit Deinos, the Wichita Wynauts versus the Charlotte Syclants, and the Tohjo Torterras versus the Goldenrod Gliscors.
Yeah, so we've got some interesting matchups this week in the sense that all of our undefeated teams, those teams that won in our first week last week, are going up against each other. So at the end of this week, we'll only have 2 undefeated teams remaining, and we will see how long those teams can hold on to that streak.
Absolutely, it's still very early in the season, so it'll be very interesting to see how all of these battles play out.
Absolutely, Kreia. Beyond just our undefeated teams matching up against each other, we really are seeing a very even matchup this week between the teams that have won and the teams that took losses last week. In battle number 1, we see the Deerfield Deerlings going up against the Geosenge Carbinks, and in both of their battles last week, they both took losses by the same margin. Each team gave 3 points to their competitors, so they seem to be on very even ground. And the nice thing about these draft format leagues is that each team you're battling is going to be a distinctly different experience. It's not like normal competitive battling where almost every team has the same handful of Pokemon on it. You're facing an entirely new roster of Pokemon each and every week you come in.
And that gives you really the best chance you have each week because you really don't have a lot of baggage coming in from one week to the other.
It also makes it much more difficult to strategize because what you've learned from the previous week may not necessarily apply to the week coming up, and you really have to look at the team that your opponents have drafted and try and strategize and determine which 6 Pokemon they're going to be bringing of their 12 Pokemon draft. Are they going to use the same teams you've seen them do in weeks past? Or are they going to be strategizing against your draft to try and outsmart you? So it's really going to be a very interesting season, I think.
Absolutely, and we should start off now with our first very interesting battle. As you said, the Deerfield Deerlings and the Geosenge Carbinks both gave up 3 points last week, which means that they seem to be on fairly even footing going into this week's battles. Let's see how they did.
Absolutely. Kicking off week 2, we see the Deerfield Deerlings up against the Geosenge Carbinks. The Deerlings are leading off with Piplup as they did last week, getting those Stealth Rocks up, and the Cottony comes in for the Carbinks, setting up the Tailwind, so trying to help out its team the best way it can, and getting the Leech Seed up on the Piplup there.
Yes, you can see it now going behind the Protect to try and get as much damage off on the Piplup as it can before it inevitably goes down to its ice. Ooh, the Ice Beam right there taking down the Cottony, as I was saying. Now you see the Stupider coming in and doing some good damage to the Piplup, but taking some damage from the Stealth Rocks. For Pokemon who are prone to such things, Stealth Rocks surely can cause a hazardous entry.
Yes, it certainly can, and the Dupider hitting the Vullaby there, Vullaby doing some good damage, taking the place of Piplup when Piplup went out, taking down Dupider now in revenge for Piplup. Vullaby going to throw up the Brave Bird on Flower, the Stunky there. Stunky coming back with the Play Rough, finishing off the Vullaby. Some good defenses on Vullaby, so a nice hit there from the Stunky. Goomy then coming in from the Deerlings and taking down the Stunky. Goomy going to have to keep throwing up that Hidden Power. Seems to be super effective up against the Chinchou, and then going to take an Ice Beam itself, so super effective all around. Aang seems to be hanging on a little bit better than the Goomy is at this point, having that recovery from the Berry Juice.
Chespin then coming in and going to take an Ice Beam as well. It seems as if the Deerlings, getting the freeze, another really tough play for the Deerlings. Honedge going to come in now against the Chinchou as Talon decides to switch Chinchou out in favor of Meow.
Yes, they now have the type advantage, but the Sacred Sword coming in and taking out the Meow, so not the best switch for Talon there, unfortunately. Honedge coming out in the face of the Tyrant, and Tyrant going to throw up that Earthquake, but the Levitate from Coughing, keeping it immune. The Outrage comes out and going to do some decent damage to Coughing, considering how defensive it is, but Coughing able to get that Will-O-Wisp up, which is going to do some good work, and then the Pain Split going to keep it around even longer.
The outrage continues from the Tyrant, and then the confusion hits as Coughing takes advantage of the healing from Tyrant and uses Pain Split itself to get some more health. Aang then switches back in and again taking Stealth Rock damage there as it throws up the heal bell to heal the burn on the Tyrant. Sacred Sword coming from Honedge once again taking out its opponent as the Tyrant switches in, gonna take a hard Shadow Sneak, and then Honedge will go down.
Yes, that leaves it 1v1 here in this final battle. The outrage coming from the Tyrant, Coughing throwing up the Clear Smog, and claiming victory. Fantastic. I wasn't sure if they were going to go for the Will-O-Wisp there to try and limit the damage, but Selene correctly chooses to go for the damaging attack and finish off what little HP the Tyrant has and win the battle. So, Selene Eleanor taking the win for her Deerfield Deerlings today. A fantastic battle from both competitors coming down 1v1. Those are the kind of battles you like to see where it's really all out from both sides trying to claim that victory. Keeps very exciting battles for us to commentate.
Yes, absolutely. Both of these competitors did an awesome job this week, and I'm very excited to see where both of these teams will continue to go throughout the season.
A great sentiment, Kara. I absolutely agree. There's so much potential in all of our teams, and we're so early on in the season yet that any team has the possibility to do great things. Speaking of great things, we really ought to start talking about the second matchup we have here this week.
Absolutely. The second matchup of this week is the Mossdeep Magikarps versus the Detroit Deinos. As mentioned previously, both of these teams managed to pull out a win for their coach last week, and by similar point margins. The Mossdeep Magikarps had the slight advantage, pulling in 3 points, while the Detroit Deinos only managed to score 2. But all things considered, the teams did remarkably well last week, and they seem to be on fairly even footing going into this one.
That is correct. Both Coach Adaram and Coach Update did great jobs drafting their teams and putting together teams last week that overwhelmed their opponents. And so it'll be very interesting to see how these two powerful teams manage to match up.
Kicking off the second battle of this week, we see the Deinos leading off with Litwick as Coach Adaram leads off with Onyx. Onyx throws up that Rock Blast and finishes off the Litwick before it's able to do anything of value, and then continues its assault up against the Dwebble.
Yes, we can see the Magikarps really coming in strong. Onyx not even setting up the hazards there, just going straight for the knockouts, taking down the Litwick, allowing the Dwebble to survive its first assault, however, and the Dwebble able to get the Stealth Rocks up, which will certainly assist the Deinos throughout the course of the battle. Grant coming in with the Earthquake there up against the Shelder. Now, Shelder did really good work for the Deinos last time, helping them to secure victory even when it looks like they were very much outclassed, and Shelder seems to be doing good work here, taking down the Onyx. Onyx wasn't even able to get up its entry hazards, and ooh, Kreia, you went down there.
Yes, unfortunately, this Shelder really seemed dominant, and I wasn't even able to get a move out.
Yeah, the Shell Smash is very difficult. Even the strongest the fastest Pokemon in the tier can do very little up against a 2-time speed boost. That's one of the most exciting things about the Little Cup tier is you give an inch and you get a mile, because there's just so little variance between the stats in this tier that you get a little boost and it really can help put you up in top tier. The Magnemite comes in for the Magikarps and finally manages to take down Bombshell, so we've got a 2v3, so not too terrible odds, even with the dominant display that Bombshell was showing there for the Deinos.
The Cubone then comes in with the Boomerang and takes down the Magnemite, those Stealth Rocks helping to break the Sturdy, and then Jabba is going to come in and take a Boomerang as well, that poison typing making it especially susceptible to the ground type move, and Cubone helping to secure the victory for the Deinos.
Yes, it's you know, these Pokemon like Bombshell that are able to come in and do these sweeps when you have such a small variance in point totals. We saw in our top 3 scores last week, it was all top 3 MVP scores were within a point of each other. And so you get a Pokemon that can take down 3 Pokemon, that's as good as gold. There's very little defense that another team can really have against that. Even if you manage to take that Pokemon down, you're already at such a disadvantage that it's very hard to come back from.
Yes, Update and his Deinos are really proving to be quite dominant here early on in the season. It'll be very interesting to see if the other coaches are able to come up with a strategy to defeat that Shelder going forward in future battles.
Absolutely, that'll certainly be something that us other coaches need to be keeping an eye on. And coming out of week 2, we see the Deinos adding another 3 points to their total score and grabbing another victory, keeping them undefeated in the Little League thus far.
Coach Adam and the Mossdeep Magikarps certainly have put together a nice team, though. We have a lot of extremely competitive Pokemon drafted to our team, and I think that you can expect great things from us in the weeks to come as well.
Absolutely, this is such a fast-paced metagame that, one slight misstep could cost you a battle, but it really isn't any indicator, as we said before, on how you're going to be able to match up against teams in the future. I expect we'll be seeing great things from you and the Mossdeep Magikarps going forward.
Speaking of going forward, we really should move on to the next battle and see what happened in battle number 3 between the Wichita Wynauts and the Charlotte Syclants.
In battle number 3 this week, we have 2 more undefeated teams coming out of week 1 who also managed to win with pretty similar margins. The Wichita Wynauts managed to pull out 3 points last week, and the Charlotte Syclants managed to pull out 2, but it'll be very interesting to see how these 2 undefeated teams manage to face up against each other.
Yes, both of these teams have some great Little Cup powerhouses on them, and it'll be very interesting to see how they use that to their competitive advantage this week.
Kicking off battle number 3 of week 2, we see Mac and his Wynauts leading with Javier, the Pick-a-Peck, up against Shunosaurus' Syclants' Remoraid. Remoraid, unfortunately, going down before being able to do anything of merit, and Joltik coming in for the Syclants, forcing out the Pick-a-Peck and getting a hard Volt switch out on the Ponyta. Drillbur then going to switch in on the Ponyta, Ponyta getting forced right back out as Javier switches in to avoid the Earthquake. The Syclants then going to get a hard hit from the Pick-a-Peck on the Joltik, and Joltik's going to go down. Javier proving to be very dominant in this battle early on, taking down 2 opponents.
Oreo, the Munchlax, then coming in and taking some hard hits, especially considering how especially defensive it usually is, going down to a torrent of special moves.
Yes, that's right, and then the Z move coming out from the Wynauts. Oh, the Trick or Treat, so opting instead of attacking for boosting itself and taking a hard hit from the Skrelp there, getting a Giga Drain off and not getting much help back for it, but taking down the Skrelp, so helping out that way at least. Throwing up the Shadow Ball up against the Chimchar. Chimchar volleying back with the Fire Punch, taking down the boosted Punkaboo. Throwing up the Fire Punch also on the Spinarak. Spinarak taking a hard damage pull from that, and then going to go down before able to take out the Chimchar.
Javier then comes back in and is going to once again clean up the Chimchar there, I think gathering its 3rd elimination for the week. Another Z move coming in from the Elekid using Shattered Psyche on the Fairy-type Spritzy, which is usually very difficult to get through, and not doing a whole lot of damage considering how powerful Z moves are.
Yes, Spritzies are very difficult to get to. You can see here, this monster just keeps stalling out, throwing up the Wish, counting on its defenses to keep it alive as it throws up Moonblast in between. Another Wish coming in and healing Wilhelmia back up completely, throwing up another Moonblast, taking down that Elekid, taking the Syclants down to their 1 Pokemon. Drillbur's a very tough Pokemon to beat, but the defenses on this Spritzy seem to be impossible, and it's going to have the power to take down the Drillbur. So, a very strong battle this week between these 2 undefeated teams. Mac and his Wynauts taking another 3 points out of this week, so bringing their total points up to 6. As we mentioned last week, only the top 4 scoring teams will have the ability to move on into the playoffs at the end of the regular season, so racking up some good early points here is definitely going to be a benefit for the Wynauts.
Absolutely, and we saw some great hits coming up from the Syclants as well, able to take down some of the stronger threats like a Munchlax on the Wynauts team, but it was just too much for the Syclants to be able to overcome this time.
Yes, that Munchlax going down to a barrage of special moves was especially surprising considering how strong, especially defensively, those Munchlax tend to be, but when you get hit in the face with a couple of Hydro Pumps, it's really hard to place blame on the Munchlax. So, coming out of this week, we have our 2 undefeated teams now already determined. We have the Wichita Wynauts and the Detroit Deinos both gaining victory this week. So we will see how those teams continue to play in the coming weeks and see which will hang on to the title of undefeated the longest.
Before we spend too much time looking forward to next week, however, we do have one more battle that we must watch.
That's correct, Kreia. We have the battle between the Tohjo Torterras and the Goldenrod Gliscors. Both of these teams had losses last week, but they had losses of about the similar margin, both giving up 2 points to their competitors, and so it should be very interesting to see how these seemingly evenly matched teams will come out of this week as well.
You, of course, have put together a very impressive team of some of your personal favorites. But the Gliscors also have some very powerful Pokemon on their side, Pokemon that see regular use within competitive Little Cup battling, as well as some Pokemon that did some good work for their team like Surskit that you don't necessarily always see when you're battling in the Middle Cup meta.
That's true, there's lots of threats on both sides of the field, and I think we should see how both of these coaches manage to use their competitive advantage this week.
In the final battle for this week, we see the Torterras leading off with Staryu. Very interesting choice for you, considering you usually lead off with your favorite Boots.
Yes, well, I think we determined, looking at the team that we were going up against, that we had enough Pokemon on the opposing team that would have weaknesses or whose moves would be resisted by Ray, that it made no sense to lead off with the Staryu, and I think we're seeing that play out here as the Surskit and the Sandshrew go down, the Blubber coming in, taking a hard hit, but throwing up some hard damage as well. Ray able to hang on even with the hail damage there, and throw up another Thunderbolt to take down the Wailmer. Ray's taking some hard damage here as the Marini switches in. We get the recover up and getting Staryu some extra play time there. Throwing up 2 recovers, not too afraid of what the Marini's going to throw up there.
Yes, you see that kind of recovering happening a lot in my line as well. Throwing up some hard damage, being able to recover off damage. Very Aber-like qualities coming out from this Staryu here.
Yes, you could find some very strong similarities between those two Pokemon. Staryu may be able to take a few more hits than you could probably do, but, different strokes for different folks and different niches that Pokemon need to fill. Casper switches in for Staryu, wanting to get off the field, save itself for all the battles to come. Casper taking some hard hits there from the Bulbasaur, and then Boots is going to switch in up against Bulbasaur to finish off the battle there, throwing up the Fake Out, doing some good damage, and then probably going to outspeed here with the U-turn and finish off the Bulbasaur. So, wow. Unexpectedly coming in very strong this week. I can say unexpectedly as the coach of the Tohjo Torterras. Did not expect to do that well coming into this week. Coming out and pulling in 6 points in week 2. So, taking a loss in the first week and then coming in week 2 pulling 6 points. That puts the Tohjo Torterras in tied for the top team in the league at this point.
Yes, absolutely. As we keep saying, it's so early on in the competition that any minor shift here or there could put a team above another, and we clearly see that this week as your team was able to pull out a deciding victory.
Yes, especially with Ray. You know, Ray's always been a strong competitor for us, but to come in and take out half of the team right off the bat, even more actually, taking out 4 Pokemon on its own, was very unexpected, and so I almost didn't know what to do with myself at that point, and I think it was a surprise for both Codman and ourselves coming in and getting such a decisive victory very early on.
Yes, you didn't even have to use your trademark APOM lead to make such a decisive early start. You instead were able to save Boots to come in and do some late game cleanup with its priority fake outs and fast speed and hard hitting attacks.
That's quite true. Boots is usually the one that we're leading off with, but this time in an unprecedented event of me doing some actual strategy, we decided to go a different direction, and I do think it seems to have worked out for our team. I think Codman and his Gliscors are certainly going to have a bright season ahead of them. They've got a lot of strong competitors on their team, and I think that they can certainly do some very good things with them. The cards were just not in their favor this week as the different matchup. As we said, that's one of the toughest things about draft battling, is that you have a completely different slate of Pokemon you're up against every week, and each team is going to be strategizing against each other. No one lesson that you learned in the previous week is necessarily going to carry over into the next one. And so that strategy is really the thing that makes these kind of draft leagues so engaging to watch, is you really never know how those two teams are going to match up.
Absolutely. I think the Gliscors are going to do some very good work. They've got some great components on their team. That Surskit did amazing work for them last week. Marini is a very strong defensive Pokemon that you can certainly rely on. And Bulbasaur is a Pokemon that, above all the other Kanto starters, certainly seems to do good work in Little Cup battling. So I expect to see some strong showings from them in the weeks to come.
But that's it from our battles this week. We've seen all 8 of our competitors go up in their Week 2 battles. We saw some undefeated teams fall and new potential contenders rise. And I think that we should take a quick look at the MVP standings coming out of this week before we say goodbye.
Absolutely, we had some very strong competitors in this second week. We saw some competitors from last week continue to show strong showings, and some surprising upstarts show up in the standings this week that we may not have seen much from in week 1.
Yes, first we'll look at the top MVPs point scorers for this week, and then we'll look at where the standings are shaking out overall. In week number 2, our third highest scoring competitor was Pick-a-Peck of the Wichita Wynauts. Pick-a-Peck came in and did great work for the Wynauts this week, scoring 3 points overall, taking down 3 of its competitors while staying alive through the end of the battle.
Yes, Javier came out very strong early on in the battle between the Wynauts and the Syclants, and really gave his coach Mac a decisive lead over the Syclants, which ultimately helped them pull out the victory in the end.
Yes, I think we can expect to see great things from Javier in the future. Our second highest scoring Pokemon this week is one that we saw on our charts last week, and that is the Detroit Deinos' own Bombshell. Now, this little shelter continues to show great things in each consecutive battle, and I can only assume we're going to continue to see such great things rolling out from it in weeks to come.
Yes, this is probably a point, however, where we need to discuss how the rankings are being compiled during the Little League.
That's true. We'll notice there that both Bombshell and Javier came out with a total of 3 points each in week 2, but the shelter has been ranked higher because Bombshell actually achieved 4 knockouts, but then was knocked out itself, giving it a total of 3, but as a result of 4 actual knockouts. So when a tie occurs, we will be ranking the Pokemon who has achieved more actual knockouts higher than the Pokemon who managed to stay alive. That brings us then to the top scoring Pokemon this week, and that is my very own Ray, the Staryu. Ray managed to get 4 knockouts in the final battle of this week, and managed to survive through the end of the battle as well, so it got credit for all 4 of those, bringing in a nice boost to its own rankings in the MVP race.
Now that we've seen how Pokemon stacked up this week, let's see how they stacked up overall.
Absolutely, and obviously being only in week 2, the rankings will be in constant flux, but in the overall rankings this week, we are seeing Pick-a-Peck, Javier, taking that 4th slot, with 4 points total, receiving a point last week, adding that to the 3 it gained this week, having 4 points total. Then we've got Ray coming in 2nd place overall with the 4 points it managed to accomplish this week. Ray got 1 knockout last week, but then was knocked out itself, and so it gained no points from the previous week's battles. And then at the top of the MVP leading board at the end of week 2 is Bombshell, the shelter from the Detroit Deinos, leading with 7 points. So a decisive lead is showing here already. Bombshell already 3 points ahead of its nearest competitor. So running away with the competition early here is Bombshell the Shelter, coming from Update's Detroit Deinos. It'll be very interesting to see what this Pokemon and its team end up doing throughout the course of the season. We're expecting great things here to come. Thank you guys so much for joining us on this week's broadcast. Kara, it's been such an honor to have you here and get your perspective on the battles that we witnessed here in week 2, and I hope we get the opportunity to talk again soon.
Absolutely, Tortimer. It's been such an honor to represent my team, the Mossdeep Magikarps, and to help you look back on this historic first season of the Little League.
As always, I've been Tortimer the Gray, and you guys have been great. For my host, Kara, make sure those likes, comments, subscriptions for me, guys, and I will see you all back here next time. Have a good one.